Let's go through this. One issue was particularly for the cook stove side, that it can't be put in individual silos. We have to look at the cooking energy initiative. And the suggestion was that perhaps it becomes part of a Swachh Bharat mission to get attraction, because end of the day your Swachh Bharat doesn't necessarily mean sanitation, it also means a clean kitchen. The specifications have to be brought in on the basis of end-use service provided, because then I need not be then technology-centric, but it should actually be technology-agnostic and incentivize at the user end rather than at the input end, because there is a lot of duplication in various programs done by various ministries, and within a ministry there are programs. Therefore, if you incentivize at the user end, that will probably be more efficient and it will bring in more synergies. Association of Clean Cook Stove Manufacturers, because in many of these regulatory processes it is seen that is the industry association which is more effective in dialoguing with the government. Otherwise it just becomes a chancy, iffy dialogue between a vendor and the ministry officials, which is not a very efficient way of going about it. And it doesn't matter if there are three associations which spring up. We have CII, FICCI and ASSOCHAM, but initially we hope that there will be one association of cook stove manufacturers who will dialogue with the government. Whether it was cook stoves, whether it was biogas, whether it was off, the solutions depended on the very nature of the segment that we were looking at, and so therefore there was a very clear necessity of identifying the segments and then working out the solutions need to be customized, because you can't have something working in Malnad region of Karnataka and let us say central Bihar. I mean, you really need to customize it. Then again, you also need to customize it depending upon the kind of population that you are looking at. We also need to help the user make an informed choice. Rather than prescribing, we should put on in the public domain a particular cooking solution and its pros and cons, and then let the user devise, because we are still today not close to a composite indexing. And that composite indexing can be a very tricky exercise. And there has to be some kind of a independent monitoring of usage. It's not enough for someone to say कि 73,000 चूल्हे बेच दिए हैं साहब, वो 73,000 चूल्हों में काम 70,000 कर रहे हैं या काम 17,000 कर रहे हैं, because that kind of independent monitoring of the usage is required. And there also has to be some kind of a communication help desk, because notwithstanding all this thing, this is on our website and please visit our website, we still are a spoken word society, so people are much more comfortable picking up a phone and going to a help desk and say this is our problem. So that is something which we thought was required. On the technology agenda, Kirk, would you like to comment? Because Chula technology and Kirk Smith are synonymous in the thesaurus. So,
I'll come in at the end.
okay. You seen a mule in an army? All load can be put on. So I am currently donning the mantle of the mule in the army. Okay, in the technology agenda, basically the whole idea was that you should prescribe the floor and you shouldn't go for the ceiling part of it. The ceiling part can be left to the user. The composite indexing, as we said, that was a little difficult, so it's much better to have a more nuanced information. It should match with the global standards, or at least we should know where it stands vis-a-vis the global standards. Given the health issues and air pollution issues, gaseous fuel is inevitably the solution for clean cooking fuel. Now, why are we saying gaseous? Well, eventually, if we have every household in India using biogas or methane based on anaerobic fermentation with carbon zero footprint, yes, that will be the ideal. But pending that, please don't tell us that don't use LPG, it will create a hole in the ozone layer. I please allow that housewife to switch over from wood and crop residue and cow dung to LPG. Eventually, we could move for a gaseous, a better gaseous within the gaseous zone. We also recognize that the issue here, whether it was biogas or whether it was cook stoves, as long as you are dealing with a homogeneous input, things are fine. But the moment you are looking at a heterogeneous input, whether it is biogas substrate or whether it is the chula fuel or whether it is the off-grid solution, there is the issue. So therefore, you have to look at how to combine them. Periodical energy use survey. Now, this is something which came up very interestingly, because if you look at health and family welfare, you have a national family health survey every 7 years maybe, or you have certain NSSO rounds which happen periodically. They inform you. There's an informed debate which happens. So the question here was that should we go for a periodical energy use survey through three choices. Do it through existing survey. You say yes, NSSO such and such rounds are good enough to give us information, or IHDS is good enough for our purpose, or would you modify the existing surveys or go for an independently designed survey altogether? Now, on that no consensus could come in because none of us had studied the existing survey questionnaires. But this is a point which becomes important. And you are walking into our trap, Sunita, because this will be, CAC will be asked to push this agenda. Economic agenda, understanding the opportunity cost of time devoted to collecting fuel and also deferred health costs on improved cooking fuel. What is happening is, when you negotiate with the establishment, particularly when you are a relatively weaker department, first your suggestion will be spiked by saying, does it make economic sense? So you have to first clear that hump of yes, economically it makes a lot of sense, and then you have to say that health and other benefits are an icing on the cake. So that needs to be brought in. A very interesting issue came up about smart subsidy mechanism, and it came in the context of chula. For example, if you can have same coal price anywhere in the country, independent of whether you are in Tamil Nadu or in Punjab or in Assam, why can't we have a same price for the chulha delivered at your doorstep? Which means instead of subsidizing the user or subsidizing the manufacturer, would you please subsidize Flipkart, Amazon and so on? And given the nature of IT and POD and other mechanisms already in place in such institutions, it might be that the subsidy leakage may actually be close to zero. Though we always have innovative people, but that may happen eventually. In the global-local linkage, what we realize that all along, it's the global discussions which then come down and inform and influence and fashion what's happening locally. I think it's time that the local informs global as well. Now, this is in terms of modern cooking energy, energy efficiency or renewable energy. What happens in the field differs quite substantially. There we also wanted to be very clear about one aspect, that let the cook stoves and cooking fuel debate be kept out of, not kept out of climate negotiation. The point was to be made very clear that if it comes to the short-term pollutants, yes, they have a climate impact, but within them, diesel is far more impactful than the cooking energy or cooking practices, and these themselves together are far less significant compared to the CO2 load. So we have to keep this in mind, and the climate consequence of the cooking fuel related short life pollutants, their role on the climate side need not be overemphasized. In fact, their role on the health side has to be emphasized. This is a point we wanted to make fairly specifically. And addressing the impact, the local air pollution impact of cook stoves, that has to be given more emphasis. What CAC needs to do. You see that face right at that side? This is exactly how CAC will look tomorrow.
No, we look happy, don't worry.
One is put the information out there. You see, there's whether it was, and we, in our presentation, it so happened that someone who has a very good job in off-grid had not heard of 4 things which will improve their performance, had not heard of. Same thing when it comes to hybridization, same thing when it comes to biogas. So there is a need for some kind of a yearly update saying that, look, this is where we have moved. Given the website possibilities, it should be updated actually periodically, and people should share experience, and it should be disseminated horizontally yesterday, practically. And so that is something which we require. It should take help from government and donors and multilaterals or whatever, but should become an independent, credible platform where people just go there and kind of get their information. Then aggregator of information and presenting the case at the national, regional and global forum, because what happens is we have this independent information scattered all over, but it doesn't get aggregated and analyzed and presented. So that's the other task for CAC. Then people said, okay, if you are doing these 2, then why are you not doing advocacy? And then the poor-centric advocacy for health, how can CAC say no to this? So I think this is what people expected CAC to do. And this blank slide that you are saying, that is Kirk Smith's.
Very nice.
Yeah, but Kirk has to state, yeah. The slide is blank, but Kirk will fill it in.
Kirk, you want to go back to that slide?
Yeah.
Do you need the
Back to
slide
the
open?
last slide, yeah.
Yeah. Last and I think the one before, the global one?
So I wanted to, Sunita asked me, spent specifically on what CSC might engage on both the national and global level. And there's some of it is in these slides, but let me emphasize, make it clearer, I hope. India is already far ahead of the world in some ways, in important ways, in this field, in terms of thinking about improving cook stoves. Historically, but more importantly, today. The Ministry of Health thing, which was on the slide but didn't get mentioned, is a really an innovative initiative. And the Ministry of Health is the first Ministry of Health in the world, in history, to pay attention to air pollution. In every country in the world, it's done by environment ministries. And they have a very different perspective than health ministries. Health ministries have to look at a range of health issues. But in India, the burden of disease from air pollution, I'm talking about both household and outdoor, is huge, as big as or bigger than any other risk factor you can think of. So it's quite appropriate that this Ministry of Health do something. But the Ministry of Health is out on a limb that's never been done before. It's not all that recognized. Anamita is on the committee. I'm an advisor, I guess, not being a citizen. They're out on a limb. Sometimes they remember they're doing it, and sometimes they don't. They need some help remembering it. They need some help, some praise for doing it. How innovative it is, and they're looking at it from the context of an integrated approach. That is, household and outdoor air pollution. It doesn't matter. There's exposure. When you look at it from a health perspective, you look at it from what people are breathing. So you look at a population, a slum in Delhi. Well, maybe they have some bad household fuels, but they're living next to a freeway and they've got burning garbage and whatever. So trying to develop recommendations, and that's really innovative. But since it's innovative, it's out there, and it's fragile. So some support from the civil society, as we call it would be helpful. Similarly, it's a very innovative initiative in the Ministry of Petroleum. They have a plan to provide LPG access to 500 million more Indians by 2024. Now, that's a big number. I'm not sure they're going to reach it. But it's only a couple of guys. They're out on a limb, too. They have to convince their bosses. The minister has to be convinced, and some of this has to go to Parliament eventually, particularly if you're going to, one big part of the idea is to target the subsidies better, take it away from all of you who don't need the LPG subsidy. I get the LPG subsidy when I live here, which is dumb. And move it down to the poor, but not get rid of it. Take it and move it. So that's a big political jump that's going to be coming up if the plan goes through in a year. They're going to need some support from civil society for that. my judgment on that, as some of you heard me say, is that we want to take it, we want to drop the word subsidy and call it social investment. But to do that, we have to target it to the really poor people and get them to use these clean fuels. So these are amazing initiatives in India that need support from civil society, and the MNRE, which has the cook stove initiative, also needs some help, particularly on the biogas side, to promote it more fully. And the last thing that links the national and international is the work on standards. India has developed its own standards, but there are international standards. Those needs to be, I think India needs to be encouraged to think about the international standards, but also to develop India-specific standards that allow, because we got word from several of the practitioners that it was hard to look at their cooking practices and the stoves they needed to design for Indian cooking practices to fit into you can think about it, the international standards. So that's something that's fixable. And the last thing is, which was mentioned, is the SC4 for all. This is the UN's initiative for sustainable energy for all. It has three objectives. One is, or goals. One is clean, modern fuels for household fuels, defined as clean cooking and electricity. Second one is energy efficiency improvements and energy efficiency, and the third is, increasing the amount of renewable energy in the world. All laudable goals. The problem is, number one and number three potentially conflict when you're talking about cooking. LPG, which is not renewable, is a very clean fuel, so we don't want to get LPG taken off the list on number one just because it doesn't help with number three. So that awareness is in there. I've been to Vienna and talked to the SC4 for all people. They sort of understand it, but it's not appearing in their rhetoric. And so what happens is there's some pressure against going to a non-renewable fuel for cooking for the poor. But of course the poor's cooking is not going to affect climate change. So the benefits of clean fuels for the poor are so great. Let's not take it off that's my recommendation. Not take it off the list just because it happens to be non-renewable. And actually gaseous fuel is a better way of framing it. You can make gas from renewable sources. It's not LPG per se, it's gas.
Yeah, I think
so you don't have to
clear.
You don't have to argue with the renewable.
That was clear in the group.
So
as well.
those are the really very specific support items I would recommend. That it's a fragile time. It was an exciting time for this arena, but it's a fragile time. There are only a few people. Big institutions, as you all know, big institutions are run by people, and only a few people in them are placed at the right moment to try to make a decision.